بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So inshallah today we will move on to the next letter, which is the letter Lam. So first is, how is the letter Lam pronounced? Second thing is, how is Lam mutaheric and sakin pronounced? And lastly, how and when is a heavy Lam pronounced as heavy or light? So inshallah, we won't go through too much detail about that, but just generally speaking, we did not do that with the letter Ra because the Ra is much more complicated. Lam's a bit more simple, so we can go through with it. So first, let's see, how is the letter Lam pronounced? So Lam is pronounced when contact is made between the front edges of the tongue. So the front edges right here of the actual tongue, when they come in contact with the gums behind the upper front teeth. So the teeth are right here. So right behind here, the front edges of the tongue are all coming in contact with this area. Inshallah, on the next slide, I'll make that much more clear. But that's basically where it's touching. So once the tongue is touching that area, then you let out the sound and the letter Lam is basically produced. Now, when pronouncing the letter Lam, what happens is, since your tongue is right there, when the sound is trying to come out, it can't go out the front. So what happens is, this tongue, it redirects the sound and diverts it to the sides of your mouth. It goes out from the sides instead. So when you're saying al, so the sound can't go out from the front, so it goes out from the sides. This in Tajweed is known as inhiraf. Inhiraf means to deviate, for something to be diverted somewhere else. So because the tongue blocks the sound from going out from the front, the tongue diverts or does inhiraf of the sound from the sides. So that's called inhiraf in Arabic. But anyway, that's Lam. Lam is pretty straightforward. It's not too complicated. Just so we can visualize what I was saying before. So if you can see here, so these are the parts that are going to be touching that are going to be touching each other while you are trying to recite the letter or pronounce the letter Lam. So from the front of the tongue, you have the front edges. This is approximate. It's not exact. It's approximate. Somewhere around this area. And on the top of your mouth, this is the top of your mouth, not the bottom. The top of your mouth, this tongue will be touching somewhere around this area. So this part of the tongue will be covering this area and be blocking the sound from going out from the front. So when you say al, so that part is covering that area. Most people don't really pronounce a Lam wrong, so that's not really much of a problem. But this is just so we can visualize what I was saying before. Next thing is a mutaheric and a sakin Lam. Just very quick, let's go through examples. So when a Lam has a haraka, obviously we release the tongue from the gums, from touching the gums. Once we release that, the tongue from there, we make the motion for whichever haraka we want to recite. For example, la raiba. So la, so the fatha, right? La. Next is with the kasra, lizaman. So li. So first one is la, then it's li. Third one with the dhamma, lumu. So lu. So we have la, li, and lu. I should have used the li example, but it's okay. La, li, lu. So this is pretty straightforward. When the Lam is sakin, the tongue remains attached to the gums while the sound of Lam is produced. For example, hal. So when you're saying hal, you don't stretch it. I'm just stretching it so we can hear it. So otherwise, just hal. It's just hal. But when you pronounce the sakin, the tongue stays there. Hal. Nul zimukumuha. So when you're saying nul, the sound, the tongue stays touching the gums while you're saying the nul part. So nul zimukumuha. The third one is amil. Amilto. So the tongue stays connected to the gums on top when you're pronouncing. So hal, nul, and amil. So that's pretty standard. I don't think anyone would have any confusion really with this. So let's move on to the next part, inshallah. A heavy Lam. So before we do this, just very quickly, let's go back to the previous picture. Or the one of you. So if you see here, the original way to pronounce a Lam, you'll see that the tongue, so the front part is up, but the rest of it is going down. And there's a lot of space back here. So you can just pay attention to this area. There's a lot of space back here, and the tongue is basically flat or down. Now let's get to the heavy lam. So as you can see, the tongue has risen from the back. And I mentioned before that this is something that we will see with every Okay, let's continue from where we were, inshallah. We are talking about the heavy lam. So lam is normally light, and it can become heavy if the following two things both happen. First thing, 1 second, let me see. First thing is the lam has to be in the word Allah or Allahumma. Some people mistakenly believe they're the same words. No, Allah is a separate word. Allahumma is a separate word. Allahumma is actually considered to be foreign to the Arabic language. It wasn't originally an Arabic word. It came from foreign sources. Anyway, and it's found in Jewish sources as well. They have something along the lines of Allahumma. It means something different for them slightly. But anyway, so if the lam is in the word Allah or Allahumma and it has a fatha or a dhamma before it, not a kasra, but a fatha and a dhamma. So if the lam is in the word Allah or Allahumma and there is a fatha or dhamma before it, then the lam is going to be pronounced heavy. Allah, Allahumma. We'll go through examples, inshallah. But when a lam is heavy, as I mentioned before, the back of the tongue does rise to make it heavy. If you do not make the back of the tongue rise, it will be light. Allah, but if you make it heavy, Allah, right? So the back of the tongue is rising to make it heavy. Now let's go through examples of, okay, it does not says mutaheric and sakin, but these are examples of heavy and light. So a heavy lam, right? So when it's a heavy lam, the back of the tongue rises. So once again, when it's in the word Allah or Allahumma and it's preceded, as in it has a fatha or a dhamma before it. So some examples. Huwallahu. So as you can see, it's in the word Allah and there is a fatha before it. Huwallahu. This is actually the word Allah. I didn't put the harakat on here. Next word is minallahi. So again, it's the word Allah and there's a fatha right before it. So minallahi. Next is wadhkurullaha. So as you can see, it's in the word Allah and the last thing we can find before it is a dhamma. So you don't necessarily look at the last letter before it. You look at the last haraka that you can find, no matter how far back you have to go. So the last haraka we can find here is a dhamma on the ra. So wadhkurullaha. Examples with Allahumma. Subhanakallahumma. Subhanakallahumma wa tahiyyatuhum fiha salam in the Quran. Subhanakallahumma. So here the word Allahumma is here and this lam has a fatha before it on the kaf. So subhanakallahumma. Next one, wa idh qalullahumma. So here there's the lam in the word Allahumma and there's a dhamma on this lam right here, right here. So the last thing before it is a dhamma. So wa idh qalullahumma. Next, when the lam is light, which means the back of the tongue does not rise. So as mentioned before, it's all other situations than the word above. That means that lam in all situations will be light. And if it's the word Allahumma or Allah, it will be light also if there's a kasra before it. So the only exception is the word Allah and Allahumma with a fatha dhamma before it. Otherwise, always light. So we already went through the examples of when it's not in Allah and Allahumma in the previous slides with all those other words that we went through like lumu and lizaman. So now let's go through examples with Allah and Allahumma with the kasra before it. So for example, fi sabilillahi, fi sabilillahi. What's happening here? There's a lam in the word Allah, but there is a kasra before it. There is a kasra before it. So fi sabilillahi. Someone says fi sabilillahi, that would be incorrect because there's a kasra before the word Allah. Next example is Qulillahumma. Qulillahumma. Here the word Allah, the lam is in the word Allahumma, but what's right before it? A kasra. Because there is a kasra, it's going to be Qulillahumma malik al-mulki. This is one word I've actually seen quite a number of people pronounce it wrong. A lot of people on this, in the word Qulillahumma, they say Qulillahumma, which is incorrect because there's a kasra before it. It would be Qulillahumma. And that is a general description of the letter Lam. So inshallah, tomorrow we'll move on to the next letter. Subhanakallahumma